They never told you the real story. For your entire life, the history books fed you a simple narrative about how wars begin. A single bullet in Sarajevo, Pearl Harbor burning at dawn, tanks rolling across a peaceful border. But that's not how it actually works. Those dramatic moments, they're just the final page of a financial thriller that was written years earlier. The truth is buried in bond markets and central bank ledgers, hidden in debt spirals that screamed warnings nobody wanted to hear. And if you understood this pattern, you'd see we're living through it right now. War doesn't start when the first shot is fired. It starts when the money system breaks, when government debt becomes so astronomically massive that repayment is mathematically impossible, when global trade fractures so completely that taking resources by force becomes cheaper than buying them with worthless paper, when the illusion of prosperity shatters and desperate leaders need a foreign enemy fast before their own angry citizens turn on them. Here's what should terrify you. We're not approaching that moment anymore. We're already in it. January 2026. While you're worried about bills, your job, your shrinking retirement account, the people running this system are making identical choices that preceded World War I and World War II. Same debt traps, same financial weapons, same desperate calculations. But this time they're doing it faster, with bigger weapons, using your money. In the next 14 minutes, I'm going to show you why the 2026 financial crisis isn't a broken, it's already here, and why it has every historical signature of a trigger event for global conflict. We're not standing at the edge anymore. We've already gone over. As I record this in January 2026, the global economy is imploding in real time, and almost nobody is telling you the truth. The United States just crossed $38 trillion in national debt. That's trillion with a T. We're reborrowing over $2 trillion, annually roughly $6 billion. Every single day just to cover interest payments on money we already owe. China's real estate sector, which held the life savings of over 1 billion people, has completely collapsed. Over $10 trillion in wealth evaporated. The Communist Party is facing the most serious civil unrest since Tiananmen Square, and trust in the US dollar. The thing that's kept American power alive for 8 decades isn't just cracking. It's shattering before our eyes. Central banks worldwide are dumping US Treasury bonds. Like toxic assets, the petrodollar system debt, BRICS nations are settling trade in anything except dollars. Gold just hit $4,600 per ounce, an all-time record, because institutional money knows what's coming. Economists call this a structural convergence. That's academic speak for multiple catastrophic systems failing simultaneously. Historians who've studied these patterns across centuries have a much simpler term for what we're experiencing right now. They call it the pre-war period, the moment right before everything ignites and millions die. In 1914, the global financial system buckled under imperial debt and trade wars. The world went to war, 20 million dead. Empires destroyed. In 1939, currencies collapsed and trade died. The world went to war again, 60 million dead this time. Now, in January 2026, every single warning indicator that appeared before those wars is flashing red, but this time it's exponentially worse. The debt is 10 times larger. The weapons are 1,000 times more destructive, and the mistakes are happening at internet speed instead of telegraph speed. Nobody can contain this. In the next 14 minutes, I'll show you exactly why we're not approaching a financial crisis, we're living in one that started in the last 30 days. I'll prove to you, using events from just the past few weeks, that this crisis has all the mathematical and historical signatures of a trigger for global military conflict. We'll examine the debt-death spiral already spinning out of control. We'll expose the economic warfare escalating every single day. And we'll explain why, when the final bill comes due sometime in the next 6 to 18 months, the price won't be paid in devalued currency. It'll be paid in blood. Your blood, your children's blood, your neighbor's blood. This is the story of the war that central bankers and politicians constructed with your money and your future. And it just went live. The 1914 pattern, the playbook, they're running again. To understand why January 2026 is the breaking point, you need to understand the pattern, the playbook, the script that keeps getting rerun because human nature doesn't change and mathematical reality doesn't negotiate. The year was 1914. They tell you World War I started because an Austrian archduke was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. One bullet, and suddenly the world's at war. Millions dead. That's the story in every textbook. It's designed to make history feel random, chaotic, unpredictable, like wars just happen because of crazy people and bad luck. But that story is a lie. A lie told to keep you from seeing the real pattern, because if you saw it, you'd recognize it happening right now. Behind the public narrative, a financial war had been raging for decades. The British Empire controlled the global financial system. The pound sterling was the world's reserve currency, the US dollar of its era. London controlled international trade, banking, and capital flows. If you wanted to do business anywhere on the planet, you did it through London. But Britain was an empire in terminal decline, drowning in debt from maintaining colonies across a quarter of the globe. Their industrial dominance was being systematically crushed by a rising power with superior technology, better factories, and a younger, hungrier population. Germany. Germany was the China of 1914. Superior manufacturing, cutting-edge technology, more efficient production, but completely locked out of the global financial system, which was entirely controlled by London and its allies. The British used their financial power as a weapon. They restricted credit to German businesses, controlled the gold supply, used their colonial monopolies to control raw materials that German factories desperately needed. They built a financial cage around Germany and locked every door. This created a pressure cooker that could only end one way. German leaders looked at their situation and did the math. They couldn't grow economically, couldn't feed their population, couldn't secure the resources they needed within the British-controlled financial system. Every peaceful path to prosperity was systematically blocked. They faced a brutal choice: accept permanent economic strangulation and remain a second-class power forever, or break the system entirely through military force. When the financial channels closed, when every peaceful option was eliminated, the military option became inevitable. The assassination in Sarajevo didn't cause World War I. It was the excuse everyone had been waiting for to launch a war that economic desperation and financial warfare had already made unavoidable. And here's the part they really don't want you to know. The bankers made it worse. Banks in London, Paris, and New York had loaned absolutely massive amounts to European governments in the decade before 1914. These loans created obligations and alliances that forced countries into the war. French banks had loaned billions to Russia. If Russia lost or collapsed, French banks went bankrupt. German banks had invested heavily in Austria-Hungary. British banks controlled the finances of half the world. When war started, these banks couldn't let their side lose, because losing meant their loans would never be repaid. They needed the war to continue. Te funded Italiano. They profited from it. The financial system created the conditions for war, then locked everyone into fighting it to the death. The lesson of 1914 is crystal clear and absolutely terrifying. When an established economic power uses financial weapons to strangle a rising power, that rising power eventually calculates that war is their only option for survival. They'd rather fight and possibly die than slowly suffocate. Now, fast forward to today. To right now, January 2026. Replace Britain with the United States. Replace Germany with China. Replace the gold standard with the US dollar system. Replace colonial trade routes with semiconductor supply chains and rare earth minerals. Replace the assassination in Sarajevo with whatever incident is about to happen in the Taiwan Strait. Everything else is identical. The financial strangulation. The rising power being contained. The impossible debt crushing the established power. The formation of hostile alliance blocs. The military buildups, it's all the same. The names changed. We have nuclear weapons now instead of poison gas, but the game board is exactly the same, and we're 3 moves from checkmate. The debt supernova. Why, the math doesn't work anymore. The primary driver of what's happening right now isn't ideology. It's not freedom versus tyranny. Not good guys versus bad guys. It's mathematics. Cold, brutal, undeniable arithmetic that doesn't care about your politics or your hopes. We are living in the largest debt bubble in human history. And it's not a bubble anymore. It's popping right now. Global debt just crossed $320 trillion at the end of 2025. That's more than 340% of global GDP. Read that again. The world collectively owes more than 3.5 times everything it produces in a year. Every single good, every service, every bit of economic output on planet Earth, adit, all up, then multiply by 3.4. That's the debt. In a normal economic cycle, debt gets cleared by recession. Bad businesses fail. Debts get written off. You take the pain, then rebuild. It's brutal, but it works. That's capitalism. But we're not in a normal cycle. We're in what economists call the sovereign debt supercycle, and we just hit the terminal phase. This is different because governments, not companies, are the biggest debtors. And governments don't go bankrupt like businesses do. The United States federal government officially owes $38 trillion as of this month. But that's just what they admit to. It doesn't include Social Security, Medicare, government pensions, all. The promises they've made that they can never keep. Add those unfunded liabilities, and the real number is over $200 trillion. Japan's government debt is 270% of their GDP, the highest in peacetime history. Italy owes 145% of GDP. France is at 125%. Even Germany, supposedly the responsible one, is pushing 75% and rising fast. Here's the trap. Governments can't go bankrupt like a company. When they can't pay, they have 3 choices. Only 3. Choice 1, austerity. Cut everything. Slash pensions. Gut health care. Raise taxes on everyone. This triggers riots and revolutions. No politician survives it. Look what happened in Greece. They tried austerity and the country nearly burned down. That was 10 million people. Imagine trying it in America with 335 million people and 400 million guns. It's political suicide. It won't happen. Choice 2. Default. Just refuse to pay. This crashes the entire global banking system overnight. Because every bank, every pension fund, every insurance company holds government bonds as safe assets. If governments default, every financial institution on Earth goes bankrupt simultaneously. Trade stops. Credit freezes. It makes 2008 look like a minor correction. For the US, defaulting means losing reserve currency status. The dollar collapses. We can't import anything. Our entire standard of living vanishes overnight. So that's not happening either, which leaves choice 3, inflation and war. And let me show you with events from the last 30 days why this is exactly what is happening right now. History proves this is always the choice. Always. Why? Because war justifies everything. War lets you print unlimited money. You are not destroying the currency. You're funding national defense. War lets government take total control. It's not tyranny. It's emergency powers. War justifies rationing, price controls, censorship, surveillance, all. The tools you need to manage a financial collapse. And here's the key. War lets you erase debts owed to the enemy. The US owes China $1.1 trillion in treasury bonds. If we're at war with China, that debt gets frozen or canceled. We just erased over $1 trillion in obligations without technically defaulting. It's the ultimate reset button. This isn't theory. This is exactly what happened in World War I and World War II. Debts between enemies were erased. And right now, a massive wall of debt is maturing. It's not coming due later, it's due now. Trillions borrowed at 0% interest in 2022-2021 have to be refinanced at 5 to 6%. The math doesn't work. Companies and governments will default. The system is breaking right now. And when leaders face collapse with angry populations demanding answers, history shows they always find a foreign enemy to blame and attack. The silent war. IT's already begun. The conflict isn't theoretical anymore. It's not approaching. It's here. It's happening right now. It's just not being fought with bombs yet. It's being fought in January 2026 with bond sales, sanctions, tariffs, and the weaponization of money. Let me show you what happened in just the last 30 days. That proves we've crossed into active conflict. December 2025. China sold $15 billion in US Treasuries, dropping their holdings to $680 billion, the lowest since 2008. They're not slowly reducing. They're running for the exits. January 2026. First 3 weeks, Japan sold $8 billion. Saudi Arabia sold $4 billion. European central banks reduced holdings. Foreign central banks are in full retreat from U.S. debt. They see what's coming. January 15th, 2026. The 10-year Treasury yield hit 4.80%, the highest since 2007. And it's rising even though the Fed cut rates. The bond market is openly defying the Federal Reserve. The market is pricing in default, risk, and dollar collapse. The dollar weapon. How we destroyed our own power for decades. The dollar was neutral. You didn't have to like America to use dollars. It was simply the most efficient way to trade. But in the last 3 years, the U.S. government weaponized it. They turned it from a tool into a weapon, and it backfired catastrophically. February 2022. The U.S. froze $300 billion of Russia's central bank reserves. Russia had saved that money for decades, held it in Western banks. Overnight, we made it disappear. We didn't seize it legally. We just froze it indefinitely. You can argue it was justified. But you're missing the point. Every other country saw that and realized, your money is only safe until we say it. Not, if we don't like what you do, we delete your savings with a keystroke. This shattered trust. Every finance minister, every central banker in China, India, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, everyone realized that holding dollars is now a strategic vulnerability. It's not safety. It's a leash. This triggered a global panic to escape dollar dependence before they become the next target. And we're seeing the results explode right now. China built SIPs, an alternative to SWIFT. It now has 6,500 financial institutions in 115 countries, processing $500 billion daily in non-dollar transactions. Russia built SPFS after being cut from SWIFT. It handles 35% of Russian payments and has 180 institutions in 25 countries. BRICS is launching BRICS Pay in Q2 2026, a system to settle trade without dollars. Saudi Arabia, our most important Middle East ally for 80 years, now accepts Chinese yuan for oil. The petrodollar is dead. Central banks bought over 1,100 tongs of gold in 2025, 3 years straight of record buying. They're building a sanction-proof system. They're preparing for war. But here's the danger. Financial sanctions are siege warfare. In history, a siege is an act of war. When you cut a nation off from money, you're cutting them off from food, medicine, technologies, everything. You're backing them into a corner. And cornered nations with nothing to lose become extremely dangerous. Japan in 1941 is the perfect example. The U.S. embargoed their oil. Japan imported 80% of their oil from us. The embargo meant their economy would collapse in months, and their military would be immobilized in a year. They did the math. They could accept national suicide through economic strangulation, or they could attack while they still had fuel in their tanks. They attacked Pearl Harbor because they thought they'd win a long war. They attacked because we gave them no choice. Fight or die. And if China's economy collapses in 2026, the party may decide war is better than revolution at home. War gives control. War unifie. War lets you blame external enemies for internal failures. It's the same calculation governments have made forever when trapped. Right now, we're doing the exact same thing to China. Technology bans. Financial restrictions, ions. And we're building the cage. And China is watching their options disappear every month. History says what happens next. They lash out while they still can. China's collapse, the ticking time bomb. While the U.S. struggles with debt, China faces something potentially worse, the simultaneous collapse of their economy and their population. The Chinese miracle was built on two things: a massive real estate bubble and export manufacturing boat whose did. China's property market, which represented 70% of household wealth, Evergrande, Country Garden, dozens of developers defaulted on over $500 billion. Entire ghost cities sit empty, housing prices down 30 to 40%. Chinese citizens watching their life savings evaporate. Meanwhile, China's population is collapsing faster than any nation in history. They lost over 2 million people in 2023. They'll lose 100 million by 2050. The working-age population is shrinking every year. This is a death spiral. Fewer workers means less growth, less tax revenue. Government can't keep promises, which leads to unrest. And here's the danger. The Communist Party's legitimacy comes from one thing only: economic growth. That's the deal. No freedom, no elections, but your life gets better every year. For 40 years, it worked. But now it's breaking. Growth down to 3 to 4%, probably fake numbers anyway. Youth unemployment over 20%, probably over 30% in reality. The property wealth is gone. Exports are being killed by Western tariffs. The population is shrinking. The deal is broken. When growth stops, the party faces a legitimacy crisis that threatens its existence. Authoritarian regimes facing this have two options: liberalize and allow freedom to release pressure, or double down on nationalism and create an external enemy. Xi Jinping has shown zero interest in freedom. He's consolidated power and ramped up nationalist messaging about China's destiny and Western containment. Taking Taiwan becomes more than territorial ambition. It becomes political survival. It rallies a fractured nation. Meanwhile, China's navy is at peak strength. They're launching more tonnage than our entire navy every 4 years. If you're a Chinese strategic planner and you think war is inevitable, you strike in this window. You strike while you have advantage. The resource wars. When paper becomes worthless, the 2026 crisis is fundamentally about real things, not paper. Finance is just a claim on physical resources: energy, food, metals, semiconductors. When the financial system works, claims are honored. You give me dollars, I give you oil. But when trust breaks, when currencies collapse, paper claims become worthless. You can't eat a dollar. You can't fuel a tank with a bond. You can't defend a country with Bitcoin. And we're entering an era of real scarcity. Oil production peaked in 2018 and has been flat since. Yes, US shale increased, but it depletes fast and costs $60 to $80 per barrel. The cheap oil is gone. Critical minerals: lithium, cobalt, rare earths, copper are in shortage and concentrated in unstable regions. China controls 85% of rare earth processing. Congo controls 70% of cobalt. These are single points of failure. In a stable world, nations trade for resources. But what happens when the currency for trade collapses? When the dollar dies and China or Saudi Arabia won't accept it for oil, the US can't just print money to buy oil if nobody wants the money. We either produce something valuable to trade, or we take it by force. Historically, when trade breaks down, war replaces it. If China can't buy energy with yuan because nobody trusts it, or if the US can't buy chips because supply chains are severed, market logic gets replaced by military logic. You take what you need. And we're watching this happen. The world is splitting into two hostile blocks. Western Bloc, US, EU, Japan, South Korea, Australia, the traditional alliance. Eastern Bloc, China, Russia, Iran, increasingly Saudi Arabia, parts of Africa, parts of Latin America. These blocs are decoupling. Separate supply chains, separate tech standards, separate internets, separate financial systems. This isn't competition. This is rival empires forming. And history is clear. When the world divides into armed empires, those empires go to war. The decoupling is preparation. It's building fortress walls before the siege. The maturity wall, WHY 2026 is the breaking point. So why? Is 2026 the breaking point, WT's year? The answer is in the bond market. And it's mathematical. 2022, 2021, central banks dropped rates to zero. Governments and corporations borrowed trillions at free money rates. US corporations issued $2 trillion in bonds in 2020 alone. Governments borrowed $15 plus trillion globally. They locked in 5-year loans. Because why not, when money is free? Now do the math. 2021 plus 5 years equals 2026. Right now, this year, in 2026, a massive wall of debt matures. It has to be refinanced, but not at 0%, at 5 to 6% or higher. Interest payments triple or quadruple overnight. This is the maturity wall. It's hitting now in Q1 and Q2 2026. Thousands of zombie companies that only survived on cheap debt will default. They can't afford 6% rates. Their business models don't work. They'll fail. This triggers a cascade. Companies default. Banks take losses. In 2026, with the full wall hitting, the stress will be exponentially worse. When banks fail, central banks face the impossible choice: let it collapse into depression, or print trillions to bail everyone out. History says they print. Always. But printing trillions in 2026, in a fragmented world with rival blocs and foreign central banks dumping dollars, won't unsave the system. It'll accelerate currency collapse. The dollar will die in international markets as remaining holders stampede out. And when the reserve currency dies, the US loses its ability to maintain power financially. We can't buy allies. We can't import with printed money. We have to use force to get what we need. The financial crisis becomes the trigger for military escalation. The domestic powder keg, rage looking for a target. There's one more factor. The darkest one: domestic politics in the US, Europe, China. The social fabric is tearing. In America, wealth inequality is worse than 1928, right before the Great Depression. The middle class is being destroyed by inflation and stagnant wages. Trust in government, media, institutions all at all-time lows. Political division is extreme. Half the country sees the other half as enemies, not fellow citizens. When the economy crashes in 2026, when unemployment spikes to 8%, 10%, 12%, when stocks fall 40 to 50%, when pensions get cut, when savings evaporate, the rage will be uncontrollable. People will demand blood. For the elite, for politicians. This is terrifying for those in power. How do you control an armed, furious population ready to burn it all down? You give them an external enemy. You redirect rage outward. War is the ultimate control tool. It silences dissent as treason. It lets a government seize total emergency control. Rationing, price controls, censorship, surveillance, it's all justified for national security. It happened in the 1930s. Depression created desperation. Leaders channeled it into nationalism and war. In 2026, leaders may calculate that foreign war is the only way to stay in power. Rally around the flag. Unity becomes mandatory. Dissent becomes treason. It's cynical and evil, but it's been done over and over. The next 6-2 months. Game theory let me game out the next 6 to 12 months. We are in late January 2026 now. The U.S. economy shows clear stagflation, signs contraction, plus inflation. The Fed is trapped. Can't cut rates without accelerating inflation. Can't raise without triggering recession. February-March 2026. Corporate debt wall hits hard. Major corporations filed bankruptcy, can't refinance at current rates. Unemployment spikes 200K, weekly claims 240K, 260K, consumer spending collapses. Retail sales crater, March-April 2026. Regional banks start failing. Commercial real estate loans and corporate loans default. FDIC steps in, but doesn't have enough capital for multiple large banks. Emergency bailout passes. But it's massively unpopular. People furious that banks get saved while they lose jobs. June-July 2026. Dollar collapses in international markets. Countries see the printing and run. Dollar loses 25% of value in 6 weeks. Oil hits $180 per barrel as OPEC Plus refuses dollars. Gas in the US hits $9, then $12 a gallon. Inflation jumps to 25% annually. Government implements emergency price controls and rationing. Shortages appear. The consumer economy stops. July-August 2026. To secure resources, U.S. and allies move militarily. Naval operations in South China Sea intensify confrontations, warning shots. Then, an incident. Collision? Missile fired. Aircraft shot down. The thing that turns gray zone into hot war. China responds with cyber attacks. Power grids go down. Internet unreliable, banking compromised. Cell networks fail. The digital infrastructure modern life depends on stops. ATMs don't work. Cards don't process, payments file. And in that chaos, only what you physically hold matters. Not paper, not digital. What you can defend. This isn't science fiction. This is logical progression of current trends. Every step has historical precedent. We've seen it before 1914. 1939, the pattern repeats because math and human nature don't change. What you need to understand, the rules of money, property, safety, they're about to change. In war or crises, paper assets become vulnerable. Stocks, bonds, cash, retirement accounts, these are digital claims on a system. If the system breaks, claims become worthless. They can be frozen by government order, inflated to nothing, taxed into oblivion. We've seen it. Germany, 1923. A cash worthless in hyperinflation. America, 1933. Gold confiscated. Europe, 1940s. Accounts frozen. Currencies replaced. Paper wealth vanished. Assets that survived were real, physical. Gold you hold, not ETFs. Land that produces food. Businesses making is skills valuable regardless of currency. Community networks built on trust. The preparation is financial, mental, physical. Understanding that 80 years of relative peace since 1945 is the anomaly, not the norm. The peace is ending. The debt cycle is turning. This crisis is different. The system itself is breaking. Too much debt to save. Too much inflation to contain. Too many powers in conflict. Reduce dependence on the financial system. Eliminate debt. Accumulate tangible assets, supplies, skills, networks. You're not paranoid. You're reading signals that appear before every breakdown. Final reality check 2026 is here. We're in it. The forces aren't approaching, they're active. The $320 trillion debt bomb is real and breaking. The US-China confrontation is real and escalating daily. The historical patterns are real and repeating with precision. We're walking the path of 1914 and 1939. Central bankers built a debt tower. Politicians weaponized finance. Military planners are positioning. Economic desperation creates conditions for leaders to choose war over collapse. We can't stop the cycle. Empires rise, overextend, accumulate debt, face challengers, panic, fight. It's history's rhythm. But we can choose not to be blind victims. We can see the warnings, prepare, protect what we've built. Because when currencies collapse and empires fall, only wealth you can hold and defend survives. The 2026 financial crisis isn't coming. It started in January. Based on every historical pattern, this crisis triggers something far worse. The world order since 1945 is ending. What replaces it is being decided now in Washington, Beijing, Brussels, Moscow. Watch the next 90 days. Watch bond markets, military movements, currency markets, gold prices. These indicators tell you everything. If this changed how you see the next few months, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. The next video will cover specific preparation strategies, assets that survive collapse, and the playbook for navigating this transition. You need it. Stay alert. Stay prepared. Understand we're not watching previews anymore. We're in the opening act of something that will define the next decade. The story isn't written yet, but the first chapters are printing now in January 2026. Don't be caught blind when the next chapter begins. Subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next.